everybody. Um, Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. We didn't even realize. Usually it'll tell us we're going live. So welcome to our October episode of Eye on ESI. If you haven't joined us in the past, this is very interactive. The Q&A and the chat is going to be very, very important to us. So we want to engage with you there. Ask your questions, as many questions as you like when it comes to your career, professional development, whatever you need. That's what this Eye on ESI is for. I am Maribel Rivera, Vice President of Client Engagement and Strategy at ACEDS. I forgot for a minute who I was. And I'm joined today by ACEDS President Mike Quartararo and CEO and founder of True Staffing, Jared Coseglia. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Maribel, hi, everybody. Great to be with you.
How's everybody doing?
Everybody good? Thumbs up? All right.
At least one thumb.
Well, this is going to be a really quick session as always. And to kick us off, Jared, let's look at some stats. What's going on?
Yeah, let's dive right in because we've got some really compelling metrics. And as we continue to do these every month, we've been gathering moss and more data points that we think are indicative of helping people understand what's happening in the marketplace. So this is what's most remarkable. We've seen more hiring happening in the last 90 days than we did in all of Q1 and Q2 combined. Now, that means number of bodies. So like literally just the number of hires has increased exponentially over the last 90 days. And that's a really good sign. It's a sign that full-time hiring in particular is increasing. We'll talk a little bit more about that versus contract hiring later in the session. And it also means that people are getting the budget to add to staff, which is great news. So this is a healthy indicator. As part of going with it being a healthy indicator, we also have found, because we're now tracking whether or not candidates that we represent or that we're working with are taking the first offer extended to them. So in the first 2 quarters, we saw nearly 80% of people accepting the first offer that was extended to them. Now that number has dropped down to 65%, which means that people are getting more than one offer at the point of hire when it comes time to change jobs. That is a big shift from what we saw happening. And just to put things into perspective, that number looked more like 45% of people taking the first offer accepted at the peak of hiring in Q2 of 2022. So we're sort of in the middle of these polarities that we've experienced in the last 12 months.
Jared, is that employers just being a little more selective, or what's going on there?
No, that's more jobs available. That's more candidates getting more offers while they're looking for jobs.
I see.
And therefore having options. So maybe a metaphoric way to put it is, in the first 2 quarters of this year, people were grabbing a bird in the hand rather than 2 in the bush. And now people are saying, let me see what the 2 in the bush look like before I take the bird in the hand. So there's a shift in candidate modality in terms of their decision-making process when offers are extended. Awesome. Now, having said that, this is a new stat that we find is really interesting. The average point of hire salary for an ediscovery PM dropped to $135 over the last 60 days, meaning the actual amount of money people are willing to extend an offer for an ediscovery PM, it decreased over the last 60 days. The number of people hired increased. The amount of money they were willing to pay for them decreased. That number back in the peak of things in Q2 of 2022 was around 150. So it's come down quite a bit, but so has the volume of hiring gone up. We think that's interesting. What that tells us are employers are being much more conservative with their spend than they were a year ago today.
These are just market forces.
These are market forces, and this next one is maybe the most dramatic market force. The average gap in desired versus willing to pay for an ESI pro, meaning when a candidate comes to us and says, this is what I'm looking for and this is what I'm willing to take, and then we say, oh, well, here are the jobs that you're right for and this is what they're willing to pay, there's a $30,000 gap between those numbers, meaning candidates are asking for around $30,000 more than what most of the customers out there looking to hire people with that skill set are willing to pay. And this is not just PMs, this is analysts, right? We've got analysts that want 130, clients want to pay 100. We've got PMs that want 160, clients want to pay 135. So there's a real dissonance happening between the job seekers and what they want in terms of money and the hiring managers and what they're willing to pay for talent. And this is creating a lot of challenges in the marketplace as it relates to hiring managers getting the caliber that they want for the price they're willing to pay, and job seekers getting new opportunities that they want for the price that they're willing to take them at. We'll see how this shakes out over time.
Are we, Jared, are we seeing a shift from what I perceive to be a sort of buyer's market, the employee to, or the candidate, to a employer driven?
Well, that shift happened in Q4 of last year, right? As I like to say, when Zuckerberg fired 10,000 people at Facebook, the rest of the world took the page from his playbook and started becoming very conservative with spend, which is why candidates were taking a bird in the hand in terms of the first offers accepted in the first 2 quarters of last year. There are also a lot less jobs to choose from because we've seen more hiring happen in the last 90 days than we did the 180 days before that. What this really means is salaries got inflated in 2022. And there are a lot of people out there that are now making more money than what employers are willing to pay to acquire talent in a semi-uncertain marketplace. Now, the good news for ediscovery is it's getting busier. People are litigating more. There's more work that needs to be done, but that doesn't mean employers are in the same mindset that they were a year ago today or a year and a half ago today, where it was cost was secondary to getting the talent they need because they were hemorrhaging staff in 21 and 22. We think about 2/3 of ediscovery professionals changed jobs between the pandemic and the Q4 of 2022. Not so much the 9 months after that. A lot less movement between October of 22 and July of 23. A lot of movement in the last 90 days, but a lot of that movement is for people that are coming up as opposed to, or people that are out of work that are getting placed, as opposed to, I'm losing all my staff, and so I don't care what it costs. I need to get a PM now or I'm not going to be able to bill and service my customers. This is a lot more growth hiring than it is attrition hiring.
Yeah. And Jared, do you think because of all the layoffs we've seen over the last few months, that this is also why, because there's more individuals to choose from as far as a candidate pool?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's not a lot more individuals to choose from if you're not willing to pay what they want. If they want $30,000 more than what you're willing to offer. So there's now this choice of, well, am I going to compromise on cash or am I going to compromise on caliber? And that's a question for both the employer and the job seeker. If I'm out of work and I was making $175 as an ediscovery project manager, am I willing to take a job at $145 in order to get back to work? Or am I going to wait the market out and see if it rebounds and I can command the kind of salary that I was making before? Or did I get laid off because I'm not overpaid based on the quality of the work that you're doing, but overpaid based on market conditions? Yeah.
Okay.
This is fascinating. We haven't had a single job seeker in 120 days now that's gotten a counteroffer from their current employer. Dramatic, right?
We talked about that last month. That is pretty.
Hasn't changed. Not a single one has gotten a counteroffer that has accepted another offer elsewhere. So don't use your job search as a way to hold a gun to your boss's head to get a raise. Instead, have the courage to ask for a raise if what you really want is to stay.
Let them eat cake, I say.
27% of our contractors that started contracts in the last 12 months have been converted into full-time employees in the last 120 days. What does that tell us?
Is that high or low?
That's very high. Very.
Really?
That's 1 in 4. Yeah, that's very high. The reason why that's so high is because people are getting full-time headcount in ediscovery. The lights are coming back on, and they're saying, let me first start with somebody that's already embedded and ingrained in our institution and get them now as a full-time employee, as opposed to going to the market and looking again. And that's working for them. And people are accepting these conversions, which is also not the case a year ago today. A lot of people were like, I don't want to accept the conversion. I want to keep looking, or I like being a contractor. And we're seeing more people say, you know what? I got a good thing here. Let me become a full-time fixture at this organization.
Yeah, and I would add too, for those out there looking, don't be afraid of a contract role. It can sometimes turn into something very lucrative for you. A lot of times firms, and this I speak from 20 years of experience working at firms, we would use a contract situation to really sort of screen a person, see what they're capable of, what their future prospects are, and then 90 days in, we would say, okay, how about you come work for us?
I think it also provides a opportunity for either developing the current skills, continuing to develop the current skills you have, or developing new skills, right, as a contract employee. I think that's a one of those things that you need to keep in mind also.
I'll say three things to this because I think they're really important. The first is here at True, we have a 93% success rate of our contractors either finishing the assignment, getting converted into full-time employees, or still being on our payroll on assignment. 93%. Of the 7%, and that's actually down from 8% a year ago, of that 7%, half of them wind up leaving a contract and taking a full-time job, and that happens. It's a very small percentage, like 3.5%. The other 3.5% wind up getting fired in the first 2 weeks, and people know immediately that they're not a right fit. Now, what I'll also say is, if you're someone that doesn't have, say, really strong relativity skills, but you're a very seasoned project manager and you're wielding a different technology and you're struggling to find a job because so many employers harp on having relativity skills to plug into their ecosystem right now, that's another way to consider making a career move. Let me take a contract with an employer that's willing to train me on that, ramp me up, get me integrated before they make the commitment to a full-time employee. And we see that happening, not a lot, but not infrequently either. And then the third thing I'll say is, we've been talking almost exclusively to the job seeker. Hiring managers, use contract as a weapon in your arsenal for developing your practice or your program for e-discovery or evolving your vendorship. Contract staffing is no longer something that is purely a reaction to a downturn in the economy the way it was in 2020, where unemployment was at 14%. We had tremendous uncertainty about what the future of all of our businesses might look like. Contract staffing is now a means that everyone needs to explore in order to find ways to mature their businesses or their lit support programs in e-discovery. It is now something almost more than half of our customers are using in either a fractional or a contract to hire or a high impact project capacity. I'll put that out there.
I think that might answer some of, we have a question. Are most contractors hiring an attempt to perm environment?
It depends. I would say not most. No, most are hiring in a high impact, we have an immediate need capacity. A lot of them are being hired because if I'm really honest, some organizations are not using external recruiters like my organization. They're relying on their internal human resources. We find it takes the internal human resources at companies that we would otherwise have worked for almost 120 days longer to fill the same position that we would fill within 30 to 35 days. And so what do they do for those 95 days in between while they're trying to find somebody full time? Well, we need a contractor because I need someone to service this customer right now. The other reason why they're using contractors is to circumvent in-office policies and geographic limitations for hiring, meaning, hey, we don't have an office in North Carolina, but if I hire a contractor, they can work remotely in North Carolina for True through us, and it's no problem for the firm. But I won't ever be able to convert them because we don't have tax status in North Carolina. So this is their way of circumventing that. Or we have a 4 to 5 day in-office policy. I've had this job open for 190 days, 250 days. I can't fill it because no one wants to come into an office. So I'm going to hire a contractor in the meantime who isn't being held to the same in-office policy standards as a full-time employee will be. Those are actually the biggest reasons.
Okay. So we've got another question regarding remote roles, but I know we've got a lot of data around that. So I don't want to talk about that yet. So we're going to go right to that as in shortly.
So last one, and this speaks to that point, is 4 to 5 day in-office requirements extend searches by 90 to 120 days. People are just not having it. And you'll see in a slide in a minute just how dramatic the rate of fill is for a 4 to 5 day requirement versus a 3 or less day requirement. This is some new data that we just thought would be really fascinating. You could see here, these are the top 5 motivators. So, you know, we always ask people, hey, what's motivating you to look at jobs? And what we found in 2022 was those were the top 5. When you look here at 2023, it's very interesting. Money actually moved up for the first time in almost 12 months. Money's now the number 2, but working remotely hybrid is still the number 1 reason why people are coming to us saying, I want out of my current employer. And that could mean, hey, I'm fully remote and now they want me in 2 to 3 days a week. It could mean I'm in 2 days a week and they want me in 4. It's a variety of those scenarios, but that shift in requirement is motivating people to go to market. So what does that mean for employers? It means if you change your remote policies, you are going to lose talent. They are going to immediately come to market and start looking for work because others will grab them up. Second, it means money's starting to matter to people. We're feeling the pain of inflation in our daily lives, and people want more money, and people know that the likelihood of getting raises that are as significant as the increase in comp they will get by changing jobs will not be equivalent in the next year. People should not expect big raises going into 2024. In fact, I think people are going to see very few raises and much smaller bonuses than what we saw in 21 and 22. Third, people are out of work. It's driving a lot of people to market. And that's been kind of perpetually growing in terms of a motivator over the last 9 months. 4 is more challenge, but 5 is fear of consolidation. And I think this is fascinating. And Maribel and I talked about this in our prep, and I just want to articulate what that means, because it's
and we want to say consolidation or valuation.
Right. So it's not just, I mean, look, we all know iPro, Logical got acquired by Reveal in the last 90 days. A lot of people got laid off. That's part of why we see unemployment, out of work rising, right? But a lot of people didn't get laid off, but are afraid of getting laid off because they were acquired, right? Maybe not just at those companies, but at other companies that have been acquired. But it's not just that. There are a number of e-discovery vendors whose book of business has been shopped around in an attempt to get acquired for many years now. Their employees are savvy to this. And those employees are concerned that because the company has not had a transaction, because the company has not had a change of control, and because that company has been shopping around looking for a buyer for a long time, and a long time is more than 12 months, they're afraid that the only way that, and so why haven't they gotten a buyer? Well, they want to be paid more than whatever the buyers are willing to pay for their business. And so how do they get the price they want to sell their business? Well, there's 2 ways to do that. The first is you go grow your business and you get more revenue and you make more profit, and then you get the number that you're looking for. The second way is you fire people. You get rid of headcount. Headcount is the single highest line item on anyone's balance sheets. And people are savvy enough in e-discovery to have a fear that my company's been shopping around for a long time. They've not gotten the price point they want. And I'm afraid they're going to start firing people. And I might be pretty well paid. I might be, as we said, part of the inflation that happened in 21 and 22. I might be first in, first out in 21, 2022. And I am afraid that if we don't get bought, I might get fired. Fascinating, right?
It's fascinating. And for anyone who doesn't know, a lot of what happens in the e-discovery industry and technology in general, I wouldn't say just most industries, frankly, is private equity backed businesses, right? And they are focused on the bottom line. If a company is not making money, they're really not interested. So familiarize yourself with this acronym, EBITDA. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And I think we've been tracking the working remotely, and we've seen that over not just 2022, but I think 2021, we've seen it stay steady at that. And I think I shared with you and Mike early this week the article about the KPMG survey, where some companies outside of the legal industry, right, overall, are looking to say, hey, we need people to return to the office. We're willing to give you increased projects, give you things, but people are like, we don't want to return to work. So I think this goes into whatever you're going to show us next. But
yes, but let me just say how that plays into this fear of consolidation or not getting acquired and that affecting my employment, which is nobody likes to fire people. No. What's the best way to get someone to quit based on this? Change your in-office policies, right? Change your in-office policies. If I change your ability to work remotely, maybe you'll quit. Maybe I can just get a bunch of people to quit, and that increases my EBITDA, and now maybe I don't have to fire people, they just leave. So there's some strategy and some methodology to why these are coming up. All right, let's keep moving on speed of hire. You'll see that at the executive level, things are slow. Why are things slow? Because there's very few jobs for directors of lit support. There's very few jobs for managing directors or partners at consulting firms. There's very few jobs in corporate e-discovery for leadership. So when those jobs come up, companies, employers take their sweet time making their decision, and the process is still taking more than a quarter before they make a decision, and that hasn't really changed. You'll see that the timeline for e-discovery sales hires dropped and then went back up to about 90 days over the course of the third quarter. The reason for that is simply, people are being a little more calculated about hiring salespeople, and also because most people want really high revenue generators, people doing somewhere between 3 and 5, maybe 8 million a year or more, and those people cost more money. And because they cost more money, the hiring managers are being more diligent about vetting out that talent before they make a decision on spending, $200,000 to $300,000 in guaranteed first-year comp or base salary to acquire sales talent in ESI. You'll see here mid-market is ticked up to 45. I think a lot of that is just because of the summer slowdown. People were on vacation. It was harder to get people on interviews. I still think somewhere between 35 and 45 days is about the amount of time it takes through us to hire a mid-market professional. That's an analyst, a PM, analytics, review manager. I think if you're trying to do it on your own through HR, it could wind up taking almost 3 times as long. And if you're 4 to 5 days a week in an office, it could also wind up taking 3 times as long. Contracting, you'll see tick down to 10 days. And that's simply because when people see someone they like, they are making a move on them. They are not hesitating, because if they do, someone else is going to get them.
And Jared, you and I talked a little bit about the difference between speed of hire in ESI and speed of hire in data privacy area. So
Yeah,
what are you seeing there?
The speed of hire in data privacy is much longer, because in e-discovery, people are much willing to use a third-party recruiter, because once they hire somebody, because most of the jobs are at law firms and vendors, they become a billable resource. They become a revenue generator, right? They're billing their time as a PM, or they're billing the processing they do as an analyst. And as a result, the longer it takes to onboard that person, the more missed opportunity in terms of revenue. And in privacy, 90% of the jobs are in corporate America, which is a cost center, not necessarily a profit center. And so they're struggling to A, get headcount, B, get third-party recruitment usage, and C, they're trying to do a lot with their HR departments by posting jobs, and they're struggling to just sift through the volume of wrong candidates, much less have the capacity and experience to identify the right ones. So we're seeing those searches take a lot longer for those reasons.
Okay. And we've got a few questions. I want to dig into the remote stuff. So, and we've got a question on innovation. So let's move forward.
Salaries haven't changed. So take a screenshot. This is what they look like for ESI at law firms. They've not really gone up or down. Salaries have not changed at vendors, although as we discussed, the average amount that people are willing to pay for a PM has gone down a little bit to 135, but these are more or less the same. So market conditions are flat and have been for almost 12 months. Let's talk about remote. I believe that's what's next.
Yeah,
So,
we've got some questions there on what's changing, what's the trend. So let's dig in.
So I'll go through this very quickly so we can get to the questions. You'll see here, this is employer requirements, meaning this is what people, when they give us a job order or they post a job order, or we hear about a job order, are telling us what the requirements are. And 83% at law firms are 4+ days a week. That's not right. That should be 3 days a week or fewer.
I was going to say that's a dramatic change if
Yeah,
it is.
that's not right. That's incorrect. The 83% should be 3 days a week or fewer. The 15% is 4 days or more. But you'll see that only 2% is fully remote. So most law firms are 3 days or less. And I would say most are in the 2 to 3 day category. Government, they all want you in the office, particularly federal. That 5% slice is really more state and local. Next slide. Vendors, you'll see here, 55% are 3 days a week or less. Only 15% 4 days or more, but you see only 30% are fully remote. There's a big uptick in the vendor space for wanting people to come into an office, and it makes sense. Why? They want to pay less money for talent. They feel more comfortable hiring somebody at a slightly lower caliber or lower amount of experience for a lower price point, who's going to be in an office where they can actually shadow and be with people more readily, as opposed to a fully remote employee who might be a little bit more expensive, but also a lot more autonomous. So because the salary pressures are working into this, we're also seeing pressure on in-office requirements changing for vendors and software companies. Corporations have really moved the needle and are now mostly 75% 3 days or fewer. That's a huge change from a year ago today, where it was almost a complete 180. But corporate jobs are about 5 to 10% of what's available in the market. So there's not a lot of jobs in corporate America for e-discovery as compared to vendors and law firms, which are about 80-85% of the market. Vendors being about 60-65%, law firms being around 25-30. Now, this next slide is the most compelling. This is actually people that have accepted an offer. The rest is what they're asking for. What we just showed you, this is what is actually getting an acceptance. And you'll see here just the dramatic change in what the pandemic did to people working remotely, right? In 2019, 70% of jobs are 4 days or more in an office. And in 2020, that drops to 32, and remote drops or hybrid shoots up to 68. 92% of the jobs that we've filled this year have been 3 days or less. But Jared, how could the last pie chart have said that there were almost 30% wanted 4 days or more, and yet only 7%? Well, that's because it takes longer to get someone to go into an office, so those jobs don't get filled as fast. Whereas the remote jobs are getting filled in 30 to 40 days, sometimes less, sometimes like 10 days. If you're fully remote, your job is going to get filled a lot faster because you're going to be able to see a ton more candidates. If you're 3 days or less in an office, it's going to be faster than 4 days, but it's going to be slower than fully remote. And what we found, you might remember me saying this in a previous webinar, is if you shift your in-office policy from 3 days a week in an office down to 2 days, the volume of interested job seekers increases by 50%. So there's a huge difference between 0, 2, 3, and 4+ days in terms of the volume of candidates that will be interested and available. Also keep in mind, a lot of people that are hiring remotely are willing to hire in any of the 50 states or have enough offices in enough places that it doesn't matter where anybody is located, which also expands the volume of people that you can explore for roles. Excellent. Happy to take those questions if we didn't answer them already.
I think we answered those 2 questions. I think the next question is about, do we have any, I think this is our last slide, right?
We have one more, yes.
Oh, one more. Let's dig into this and then we can get to one of our questions.
So this just shows you contract versus full-time, and you'll see the ebb and flow here really spiraling out of the pandemic in 2020, where contract really jumped up to almost 60%. But then full-time hiring got turned back on so fast in 21. It dipped a little bit in 2022, and you'll see it dipped even more so far in 2023, but it's coming back on, right? And it's not dipping nearly as dramatically as, say, privacy, but there's a significant imbalance between the amount of contract jobs being more voluminous than full-time. Why? Well, because contract and privacy, or hiring in privacy, is generally a cost center, not a profit center. And as a result, people are just more willing and able to get full-time headcount in e-discovery because those resources at law firms and vendors are generally very billable. If we go to the next slide, you'll see this is a 13-year kind of trend mark. And we're predicting that in 2023, we're actually going to see contract staffing dip even more and full-time hiring increase slightly for e-discovery. But here's what's so interesting about this chart, as we've said, the pendulum swings every 24 to 36 months now. It no longer takes a decade for the job market to rebound, going from contract hiring to full-time and then back. That's why I say to everybody, as I did at the beginning of this call, making contract staffing part of your process, part of a ritualistic habit that you develop as a leader when you're running an e-discovery practice, or you're running a lit support department, or you're running a vendorship, is critical to maturing and having flexibility that can adjust to market trends and continue to evolve your business. It's not just a reaction to a down economy anymore.
Excellent. So one of our questions is, does True do any placement in the innovation area? What is the market like for those positions?
Yeah, so I mean, we will when those jobs exist. They don't exist yet. The ones that do are largely very much leadership or C-suite, CINO kind of positions. I think a little bit of it is a red herring. You know, there is some jobs out there that I think people take for the title, but don't necessarily have the buy-in necessary to actually drive innovation. So they're there to create that buy-in in order to actually execute on it. I think we all talk about AI, but I don't know that a lot of people are hiring for skill sets related to AI. But that will change. I do think that will change. And we are hearing conversations now about, okay, we're getting associates to write prompts for AI, but they're going to charge more money. So it doesn't mean that the cost of discovery is going to go down. It's just going to be reallocated. It probably means over time there will be less, blood, sweat, and tear document reviewers out there looking at documents. But now you'll have to lean into the price of technology for AI, which is expensive right now, plus the increased price of associates or staff attorneys or specialists that are wielding that AI, who know how to build generative AI models. Or non-generative AI, just using AI to analyze or search and recall documents in a non-keyword fashion. But we're still not entirely sure that that's led to a clear, definitive pool of jobs available yet.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jared. I think our next call, Eye on ESI, is November 2nd, same time, same bat channel. If you haven't registered yet, you can register for the whole year. I think we've got it all the way through June or July of next year. So feel free to look for the registration link and register for other upcoming ones. If you've got questions that we didn't answer today, please send them along. We'll make sure to answer those also. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.